We the Indians are deeply grateful to Dr. Manmohan Singh, not just for what he accomplished, but also for the values that he embodied, which are integrity, resilience, and a profound commitment to the welfare of our nation. His life's work is a testament of the power of intellect and humility, a rare combination in the cutthroat world of politics. Here are some of the reasons why his contributions and his legacy deserve to be celebrated, saluted, and forever remembered. In the summer of 1991, India stood at the precipice of economic disasters. Foreign reserves had plummeted and inflation was skyrocketing, and the government was staring at the possibility of defaulting on loans. Panic gripped the entire nation. But into this storm stepped a man who was more of a scholar than a politician. A reluctant leader though, but the right one that the nation needed exactly at that point of time. And his name was Dr. Manmohan Singh, the then finance minister, who addressed the parliament with a mix of rather urgency and optimism. His words were, "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." And these words resonated deeply among everybody. With the backing of the then Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, he introduced sweeping reforms that liberalized the entire Indian economy. License Raj was dismantled, and that removed decades of bureaucratic strangleholds on businesses. Trade barriers were lifted and foreign investments were invited, which injected a new life into the stagnant economy at that point of time. He also devalued the rupee, a bold but an also unpopular move at that time, but eventually that made Indian exports very competitive globally. And these reforms weren't easy to make. They required courage, especially in a politically volatile environment. But Dr. Singh persevered and turned a crisis into an opportunity. The foundation he laid in 1991 transformed India into one of the fastest growing economies in the world and lifted millions out of poverty. For better clarification on this, let's have a look at the board and see what I'm talking about. So here, as you can see this table, I have given 20 years impact of the economic reforms made by Dr. Singh from 1991 to 2020. So on the extreme left, you can see the number of years. Here you can see foreign reserves in USD billion. Here you can see GDP growth rate, and here you can see the poverty index. So in 1991, our foreign reserve was barely 1 billion, which by 2020 rose to 620. Huge benefit. Further, GDP was barely 1.1, which fluctuated more or less, and by 2020 it was 6.5. Poverty also reduced significantly. As you can see, about 45% of our population was considered poor by 1991, but by 2020 the number significantly reduced to 16.4. And not just this, our GDP was barely 0.27 trillion, in other words only 270 billion. All these numbers are in dollars, by the way. And post reforms, by 2020 it rose to 2.9 trillion. Currently it is close to 4 trillion. Poverty reduction we have already discussed. Life expectancy has also risen. It was in 1991 58.7 years. Currently by 2020 it rose to 67.2. FDI was barely 0.097 billions, which currently rose to 82 billions. Our global trade share was barely 0.5%, and currently it is 2%. So as you can see, there has been significant improvement. Even capital reforms, there was no SEBI before 1991, but later on during economic reforms, SEBI was established and it was made operational. So this has been the impact of economic reforms initiated, in fact made by Dr. Singh. When Dr. Singh became the Prime Minister in 2004, many doubted his ability to lead. After all, he wasn't the leader of the masses. He didn't even thrive on populism, and he was a quiet man. But what he lacked in charisma, he made up for with his vision and a deep understanding of the nation's needs. His leadership ushered in a decade of stability and progress. His social and economic transformations were, you can say, more or less marked by a series of transformative policies. One of them, a very popular one, is Manrega. His government introduced this one, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the largest public works program in the world, providing rural families with guaranteed income and a life full of dignity. Another one, Right to Education Act, under which he made education a fundamental right for everybody, ensuring that millions of children, especially from the marginalized communities, had access to proper schools and education. And not just this, under his NFSA, National Food Security Act, he fought hunger by guaranteeing subsidized food to 2/3 of the population of the country. And it doesn't end here. Under his Right to Information Act, he empowered the citizens to hold the government accountable for anything, and that brought transparency to the governance and instilled the democracy in its true sense. And each of these initiatives were not just policies on papers. In fact, they were very transformative, and they changed lives, especially of the most vulnerable class of the country. Now, what am I saying here? Let's look at the board and figure out more. On the extreme left, you can see the legislations that I talked about, and here are different metrics. So we'll go one by one. Firstly, the impact of Manrega. Metric number 1, 100 million rural households benefited annually. 2 billion person days of work generated annually. 50% of the workforce transformation by women. Second one, Right to Education Act under RTE. 200 million children gained free education. 96% primary school enrollments achieved. Dropout rates reduced from 50% to less than 20%. Under NFSA, 800 million people, like I said, covered under the subsidized food program. 5 kg food grains per person per month at a very marginal or subsidized rates. And allocated about 1.84 trillion annually. Now this 1.84 trillion is in rupees, not in dollars. That's more or less 0.9% of the GDP. And finally, under Right to Education Act, RTI, 6 million RTI applications were filed. In fact, they are filed annually, more or less. 65% awareness by 2020, which is up from barely 15% in 2005. Exposed major corruption cases and scams under RTI. So this has been the impact of Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh's leadership during the 2008 global financial crisis was another masterclass in crisis management. While economies worldwide were collapsing, India weathered the storm with minimal damage, and his prudent fiscal policies and regulatory measures helped keep the banking sector stable and also ensured that India's growth continued. The story continued despite global crisis. While his domestic achievements are monumental, his contributions to the India's foreign policy are also equally remarkable. He wasn't a loud negotiator, but a strategic thinker who made India's voice heard at the global stage. One of them being Indo-US Nuclear Deal 2008. His landmark agreement ended decades of nuclear isolation of India. It secured energy for India's growing economy and affirmed India's status as a responsible nuclear power. Another one, he championed India's role and global reforms. Under his leadership, India became a prominent voice in groups like G20, BRICS, and United Nations, reinforcing our position as a rising global power. The thing that set Dr. Singh apart wasn't just his intellect, but in fact his humanity. Born in a very modest family in Gah, now in Pakistan, he experienced hardships firsthand. His journey from a very small village to Oxford and Cambridge and eventually to the highest offices in India is a story of grit and determination. As a Prime Minister, he never let power corrupt his principles. He worked late into the night, working over details of policies that could affect millions. He avoided any sort of theatrics, rarely spoke in self-praise, and maintained a stoic demeanor even when he faced relentless criticism throughout. In an era when politics often descends into spectacle, Dr. Singh stood as a beacon of integrity. He once said, "History will be kinder to me than the contemporary media." That's because he received a lot of criticism from contemporary media at that point of time. And history has in fact proven him right. His vision for India, Dr. Singh believed that, in an India where growth wasn't confined to cities but reached to every village of India and every marginalized community was helped and their lives were uplifted, that's the true India that he envisioned. He also made a significant growth in education, and India's voice resonated to the global stage. Dr. Manmohan Singh isn't just a leader who served, he is a leader who transformed. His reforms in 1991 rescued India from the brink of economic collapse. His policies as Prime Minister gave millions of Indians opportunities for a better life. His global diplomacy earned India the respect and partnerships that continue to fruit even till date. For every Indian family lifted out of poverty, for every child who found a classroom, for every job that sustained a household, India owes Dr. Manmohan Singh an endearing and grateful thank you. He is a reminder that true leadership isn't about loud rhetorics. It's about quiet, determined action that actually changes lives. So this is it in this video. This video was a tribute to Dr. Singh. We are very grateful. And my name is Dr. Ruben Singh, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned. Have a good one. Cheers.